There is nothing wrong with your YouTube player. Do not attempt to adjust the picture. I am now in control. I control the horizontal and the vertical. I can delude your image with a lot of cute cat pictures and the same old tired meme you've seen on the internet reused over and over again and beyond. For the next hour or so, however long this ends up being, I will control everything that you see and hear. Unless, of course, you turn off the video or look away from your screen, but whatever. You are about to experience the awe and mystery that reaches from the deepest inner minds to a review of The Outer Limits. Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for The Outer Limits Season 4. This video is part of a series of videos where I, on my mission to review every single episode of the 90s version of The Outer Limits, one season at a time. In this video, I will cover all the episodes of Season 4 of the 90s The Outer Limits. So, I mentioned in my Season 3 review that when I looked ahead at the episodes of Season 4, and I didn't believe I had seen any episodes of Season 4, which would be a first, because I actually thought I saw a lot of episodes of The Outer Limits until I started watching the whole show from start to finish, and I realized that most of the episodes I've seen were in Season 1, and outside of that, I haven't actually seen the very many episodes. And I was actually a bit upset because when I was watching the show on syndication, they just seemed to be showing the same episodes over and over again and skipping over all these episodes I've never seen before. However, I did find out after watching Season 4 that that isn't actually true. There are, in fact, 3 episodes I've seen. Well, 1 episode I'm absolutely certain that I've seen before, and 2 other episodes I'm fairly certain I've seen before. They seem really familiar to me, although I couldn't really place them. I can't be entirely positive I've seen them before, but I must have seen at least parts of them because they seem incredibly familiar. I didn't know what was going to happen in them because they were just vaguely familiar. But the one episode I clearly remember, I knew exactly what was going to happen because I remember that very clearly. So there was at least one episode for sure I've seen before, but I'm fairly certain I've actually seen 3 of them, which I think Season 2 was there was 2 episodes I was for certain I saw, one that I'm kind of very iffy that maybe I saw, maybe I didn't. So it's about the same as Season 3 actually. But anyway, I think I can say definitively after watching Season 4 that this probably, well, definitively then probably is kind of contradicting. Whatever. I think this is my favorite season of the show so far. I talked about in my Season 3 review how I felt like the first 2 seasons were very hit or miss. Some episodes were awesome, some episodes were terrible. But Season 3 was down the middle where most episodes were just okay. I mean, some were good, some were really good okay, and some were kind of bad okay, but most of them were just alright. It didn't vary in quality the same way the first 2 seasons did. However, with Season 4, it is going back to the format of the first 2 seasons where it's very clearly up and down, where you have a lot of awesome, great episodes and a lot of terrible ones. However, the reason why I think this is my favorite season is because the awesome episodes far outnumber the terrible episodes. In fact, I would say the majority of the episodes are either really awesome, great, or just pretty good. There are a few stinkers mixed in, but they're far outnumbered by the really great ones. In fact, this is the first season I've given out a lot of 9s and 10s. If I rate each episode between 1 and 10, 1 being the worst, 10 being the best. And previous seasons I only given out a couple 9s. Some Season 3 didn't even get a 10, I believe. and there was like 1 or 2 in season 1 or 2, but not that many 9s. Here I gave out a lot of 9s and 1 10. So, and a lot of 8s too. So it's definitely the most 9s I've given out. So it's I thought it was a great season. Now, part of it may be, of course, this is all fresh to me. And I'm watching these episodes for the first time, unlike season 1 where I'd seen most of them a dozen times before. But I just think there's just a stronger quality overall this season. I kind of get the impression that, like, they focused the great episodes. They focused more on the episodes that didn't quite work. They didn't quite work because they felt like first drafts, and which is an issue that you have with old style TV seasons that have like 24, 25 episodes. This one has 26 episodes, which is more in season 3, which only had 18. And that's where you get the issue that if you have so many episodes in one season, you don't really have some episodes. You just don't have time to flesh out properly, especially if the idea is not as strong or fleshed out, and so it doesn't really. They kind of just have to roll camera, regardless of how ready they are, and it shows. And I think in this particular, because I think most of the bad episodes this season are bad because they just weren't worked on enough. Like, they're good ideas that could have been done well, but I think it was apparent that they focused more on the stronger episodes because they clicked more and they just knew more of how to do that properly than the other ones. They needed more time, which they didn't have. But just my, theory, my opinion on that. Anyway, I want to talk about Naren Shankar. Now, Naren Shankar was a writer for Star Trek Next Generation. He wrote some of my favorite episodes. He wrote one of my third favorite episode of Star Trek Deep Space Nine. I think it's the only episode from Deep Space Nine that he wrote, or maybe one of 2. The Quickening. That's my third favorite episode. A very underrated episode about Bashir going to cure this virus, but he can't do it. It was great. I love that episode. Anyway, Naren Shankar also more recently is known, and this is where I first heard of him actually, he's the showrunner for The Expanse, which is, I believe, one of the greatest, if not the greatest sci-fi show of all time. It is definitely the best science fiction show currently airing. In fact, it's my favorite show currently airing, period, regardless of genre. I love it. So I've gotten to know Naren Shankar from that. Now, why do I bring him up? Obviously, because he's a writer, executive producer for The Outer Limits Season 4. Now, I don't know. Showrunner is not like an official title, so I don't know if he was the showrunner this season, but I do know that his name was slapped all over the credits of every episode. He was executive story writer. His name was tended to be written by and screenplay and teleplay and all that. It seemed to have his name there, so it wouldn't surprise me if he was, but I don't know for certain that he was. It would be a total guess, but I do know that he was heavily involved this season. Now, I remember when I first started my reviews of The Outer Limits, I saw Naren Shankar's name in the credits, but when I looked it up, it wasn't until season 4 and 5. Now, I believe I saw his name several times in season 3, so I think he was involved in season 3. But if I may be wrong about this, but I believe that he wasn't as heavily involved in season 3 as he was in season 4 and 5. And so I remember thinking to myself when I saw that, I wonder if season 4 and 5 are going to be the best seasons. Because, of course, I know how awesome Naren Shankar is from The Expanse and his work on some of my favorite episodes of Next Generation and Deep Space Nine. And I can't speak to season 5 yet, obviously, because I haven't rewatched or haven't watched it. Most of the episodes I probably haven't seen there either. So I haven't watched season 5 yet, so I can't say for sure. But season 4, yes. I definitely get that impression. And I don't think this is me not knowing that, Naren Shankar is involved in this season, therefore it's going to be better. And I convinced myself this is going to be better. I don't think so, because I wasn't thinking about this actively. I was watching the episodes like I watched the episodes first and realized how there were a lot of great episodes, better episodes. And then I realized, wait. That's right, this is the season that Naren Shankar was involved with heavily. So I think his inclusion definitely increased the quality. Now that being said, some of these terrible episodes I'm going to get to, his name was plastered on that as well, so he's not perfect. But I think it definitely, having him on board definitely increased the quality of the show. Just my humble. Anyway, let's go ahead and get into the episodes of Season 4. Let's start with the first episode, which is called Criminal Nature. I did not care for this episode that much. I don't know if I would go as far as to say it was terrible, but it was kind of like, again, it left me with the false impression that, oh my god, Season 4 is going to suck. This is boring. Why am I even watching the show? It had that guy from Office Space that was like, yeah, can I get you to work Saturday? And can you go ahead and work Sunday too? Thanks a bunch. Anyway, he was playing like a cop who was hunting down genetically engineered mutants, and they found out that his son was a genetically engineered mutant, and he came back and haunted him and tried to kill him, and blah 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 blah. I don't know. It felt like a typical detective genre cop show type thing, and I don't really into that genre, but it was a poorly done episode, I think, all around. It was just because I wasn't invested in any of the characters. I didn't care about it, and when the guy himself turned into a mutant at the end of the episode, I and his family shunned him. I didn't care. I felt zero connection, zero interest with this episode. I really thought it was boring. Anyway, let me go ahead and get into the next episode, which is The Hunt. I think there was a movie that came out last year. I think that was also called, was it just called The Hunt? And it was also about, people hunting humans. But that movie was very problematic, but I'm not getting into the movie. I'm getting into the show, where in the show, of course, this episode, they weren't hunting humans. They were hunting androids that looked like humans and thought like humans and behaved like humans. And it's an interesting concept. It had God, what's his name? The warden from Shawshank Redemption and the captain from the Next Generation episode, The Wounded. I can't remember his name. Bob Gutton? Something like that. Anyway, and there was, three guys, this guy, Bob Gutton, and his brother's son go out to hunt androids, and they have this guide, and he turns out that the guide is also an android. And it's kind of like, reminds me of The Running Man. It's like, oh, if you survive, you get to the end, and then you'll win, and we'll let you go. And of course, they found out that the guide was one of the previous winners, so they let them go, but they have no place in society, so they have to just be a guide for the hunt. And you find out this other guy who's in love with this other android, he gets killed, and he's like, I hate the humans. And he survives at the end. He becomes, by killing all the humans, by the way, that are hunting him, but then he just becomes a guide as well. Yeah. I mean, this episode was interesting. There were parts of it that definitely kept my attention, and I think that some of these characters were interesting, particularly the young boy who didn't want to go hunting, and he ended up getting killed by the androids. But, I feel like they could have done a lot more with them. I didn't think that the ending really justified the character growth and the story that they had built up so far. So the ending really brought it down for me. So I will say this episode is just okay. Anywho, let us get into the next episode, which is Hearts and Minds, which I loved this episode. Now, this episode reminded me a lot of the Black Mirror episode Men Against Fire. And of course, this came out way before then. And I don't think this is the first episode to do this story. I'm sure the story is done even before here with maybe other Outer Limits of Twilight Zones or just short stories in general. But it did allow me to sort of, just thinking about that Black Mirror episode, help me to predict the ending very early on. It was obvious what the ending was going to be, but I still loved it. Even though I saw the ending coming from a million miles away, I still think I love that episode of Black Mirror too, the Men Against Fire, because it's a powerful message. So what's the message? Well, this episode is about these soldiers who go to another planet to hunt down these monsters, and you see them hunting monsters, and they have to take their drugs to protect them from the monster. I'm sure just my description of this, you can see where this is going, especially if you've seen Men Against Fire. You know where this is headed. But you know, it was really predictable for me that where this is headed, because the colonel or general, whoever's in charge, gets killed, and so his second in command has to take over, but she had her drug supply was damaged or whatever, and she starts to behave strangely, and they think, ooh, does she have the disease or whatever? But it turns out the drugs, of course, the Men Against Fire twist, the drugs were just drugging them up and making them see monsters when there weren't in fact other monsters. They're people. They're people, and not monsters. Now, it does differ from Men Against Fire in some way, because in Men Against Fire's case, they were just average civilians who were being hunted and killed because they were unsanitary or whatever, and so they made the military take drugs to make them think they were monsters. And when this dude found out that they weren't monsters, they were people, he of course couldn't live with himself. And in this case, they're actually other soldiers, and the big twist at the end is, and I actually love this twist ending, I thought it was amazing, was that once they all realized that they weren't monsters, that they were just normal people, they came up with their, put their weapons down, put their hands up, and we surrender, oh, we're not going to hurt you, we know you're just people, I can't believe we're hurting you. And the other guys were freaking out until the soldiers came up and killed them all like stupid monsters. So the twist is that the other side that they were killing, they were taking the same drugs that also made them think they were monsters. So in this case, it's not one-sided like it was in Men Against Fire. Both sides are taking drugs to pretend that the other side are monsters, which makes it easier to kill. Now, the reason why I love this, I think this is, both this and Men Against Fire, is very, very strong commentary against war, again, in general, on how we're meant to demonize the enemy because it makes it easier to kill. So they just take it to the largest extreme. Why not actually turn them into actual demons or monsters, and then we'll make it really easy for them to kill. But it's an analogy for how we kind of do that already. We just don't do it in such a literal term as these sci-fi shows do. We do, particularly in war, and I'm sure they do this with the soldiers. They feed them all the propaganda that these are, they're heartless, evil doers, as W would say, and it just makes them easier to go out and kill them all. So I think that's a very poignant commentary, and I thought it was done extremely well here in a very clever way. So I do indeed love this episode. Anyway, let me get into the next episode, which is called In Another Life. This is the episode where they played a clip from this episode in the season 3 finale. So that's when I watched it in order and I saw it, and it was a clip show. And they played a clip from this episode. It's did I miss something? What? I haven't seen this episode. Did I skip over an episode? But then I looked it up, found out that the episode was in fact in season 4, that they were playing a clip from an episode that haven't even aired yet, which I think is stupid. But I'll get into the whole clip show folly, unfortunately, later on in this video. Anyway, so this episode is about this guy who's about to kill himself, but he gets dragged into a parallel universe from his counterpart, who wants to use him to hunt down this other version of himself from the parallel universe he brought over that killed his wife and is going around killing his friends. So he wants this version of him to stop the killer, but really he's just using him, and he says, oh, I'm going to help you reunite with your wife, who was in his reality had died, but in this reality was still alive. But he of course had no intention of doing it and was just trying to use him to kill the murderer. But then the murderer convinces him to join his side and try to team up to get this guy, but then he realizes that the murderer is just using him as well. So at the end he manages to get the better of both of them, and he sends the murderer, I believe, back to the murderer's own reality where he gets shot by the police, and then he sends the rich dude from this reality back to the main character guy's reality where he was about to shoot himself, and I believe the police come in and shoot him there as well. And so he gets to live in the rich guy's reality and pretend to be rich guy, and meets up with the version of his wife that's still alive and starts to hang out with her. And the episode ends. I like this one. I thought it was very clever. It was kind of cheesy at times, especially the whole killer. They don't portray killers in a realistic way. They're just oh, I'm gonna kill. His motivations, I didn't really buy. It didn't come off as a realistic person, just like your mustache twirling villain. But it was an interesting concept, using the parallel universes this way, and I did appreciate the happy ending where the suicidal dude got the better of the deceitful rich guy and the psychopathic murderer versions of himself. Very interesting concept. Loved it. So let's get into the next episode, which is called In the Zone. I did not care for this episode. I don't know if I'd go as far as to say it was terrible, but it was not good. It was about this, futuristic, stupid game where lasers are shooting at people. And it looked like American Gladiators. I couldn't take this sport seriously. Anyway, it's a sports star, and he's starting to lose his edge because he's going too old. And then, what's this? The mentor guy from Sensei from the Karate Kid comes up and offers him these drugs, and the drugs are supposed to make him like the Flash, basically. They make him like Quicksilver. They make him super fast, and so he's able to cheat and win the games very easily. But then drugs backfire, and he gets knocked out of the whole time-space continuum, and his girlfriend has to go into this weird time thing to get him back, and he doesn't want to go for reasons. And Karate Kid Sensei has to sacrifice himself at the end to bring him back, and it was revealed, he was actually only 35 years old, and even though he looked like an old man because he used the drugs on himself, which made him age a lot quicker. Blah, blah, blah. I don't care. Anyway, it was kind of boring. Didn't care for this one. So let me get into the next episode, which is called Relativity Theory. Now, this one is one of the ones I'm pretty sure I've seen before. I think I saw this one years later, in the late 90's, as they say, the 2008, 2009. So maybe a decade after it came out, online. It might have been a streaming service. It might have been iTunes. I'm not sure. But I think I've seen this one, years and years later, not in syndication. But I didn't remember it that clearly. I just vaguely remembered, and when we got to the end, I clearly remembered the ending. I was like, oh, yeah, I definitely seen this before. But, so maybe I only saw the end. I don't know. I mean, if I saw it on a streaming service, I would have saw the whole thing, so maybe I actually saw it on cable. I don't know. Anyway, in this episode, you got a military team with a civilian go on the spaceship to mine this planet for this corporation. It's going to earn them millions of dollars, and dollar signs in their eyes. And they're told it was uninhabited, but they find some other aliens there, and the aliens kill some of them, so including the commander, so the second in command takes over, and he's like a gun-hungry ass. Actually, the second in command is the civilian, but the military guy in command takes command from her, steals it from her, and he's all gun hungry, and he wants to just kill all the aliens, where she doesn't want to. She thinks it's unethical, but he overrides her, and everyone else goes along with him because they have dollar signs in their eyes, if we kill the aliens, we'll be rich. So they kill all the aliens, and even though she tries to stop them, so they have to tie her up and leave her on the ship, and she tries to escape with one of the aliens, but they trap her, beat her up, and tie her up and take her on the ship and kill all the aliens off. And they're like, we got all the dollar signs, we're going to be rich. But It turns out, like, they figure out that this weird thing they thought was just a religious symbol was actually a homing beacon, and it turns out that these aliens weren't indigenous to the planet. They were from another planet, and they were all teenagers. And she described them as like Boy Scouts on a camping trip. So when their parents came in a big bad warship, they weren't very happy with these humans that killed off all their kids, so they destroyed the ship. And then the episode ends with them heading to Earth to kill all the humanity. I really like this episode too. I think it's really great as well. I mean, the message is kind of, your typical Pocahontas, what's that movie called? Avatar, type message, Ferngully, whatever, that just warns against the danger of colonialism, and I totally agree with that. Actually, and I think this is actually done a bit more clever than, say, something like Avatar, to be honest. Avatar is kind of too on the nose and also has like the white savior. Whereas here we get a specific message. Now this is where my leftist, tree hugging, SJW, whatever the fuck you want to name call me. This is where that side of me comes out, because here you have a message where you have the they even refer to her a lot in the episode as an environmentalist, the civilian overseer. They say, "Oh, you damn environmentalist." That's what they call her that a lot. And she's warning, no, we can't just like murder these people off. And, the military asshole guy is like, this is how humanity's always been. And the other people, they're not evil like he is. They're not like stupid and greedy or whatever like he is, but they are greedy because they let him convince them to go along with him because it's more beneficial to them, because they'll become rich if they go along with the asshole military guy, but if they agree with environmental snowflake, then they won't be rich. They won't benefit. There's no benefit for them. They won't get tons of money. They'll be poor. So they ignore her and go with asshole military guy, even though they know that he's wrong and he wants to just murder off these innocent aliens. And so it turns out that the environmentalist, the snowflake, lefty, tree-hugging environmentalist was correct. And because they didn't listen to her, all of humanity is going to be wiped out. I kind of like that, to be honest. And because I think it is a great analogy to environmental crisis, like climate change, the obvious one, which I think they had in mind. But more than that, it's just also has to say colonialism. You can even throw in modern day instances of denying refugees and stuff like that, where he's like, "Oh, you bleeding heart liberal, shut the fuck up. We're not going to listen to you," and then the consequences are worse. And I think it's absolutely the case where a lot of the general public or the moderates, or whatever you want to call them, will just go along with the assholes because it benefits them. There's no benefit. Where's the money in it if I listen to the bleeding heart liberal? There's no money in it if I help poor people, starving people. Where's the money? Where's my benefit? How does that benefit me? And this episode answers that. It benefits you because it's better for the human race. And if you keep, just always being selfish and only thinking about yourself, it's going to come back and bite you in the ass, which is what it does in this episode. So I know, bleeding heart liberal I am, but I think the people who wrote this episode clearly were as well. And so I love it. I think it was a great episode. Really enjoyed it. Anyway, next episode is called Josh, and this is an episode I did not care for. I think this is a clear example of what I was saying before about not having enough time to work on this episode. And it seems like an early draft. It needed a lot more work on it to make sense. I think it was a mess. This is the best way to describe this episode. It was a plain old mess. It was about this guy who has healing powers and heals this girl, and the reporter gets a hold of footage of him healing the girl, and he tries to out him, and the military ends up capturing him and studying him and torturing him or whatever, and he wants to escape, and so the reporter eventually helps him escape, and he like glows and goes away. They never explain what he is, and if he's an alien or from another dimension or whatever the hell. They don't explain. It's like, cool, let's remain in that. Like, it tries this like Starman, and I love Starman, one of my favorite movies, and Midnight Special more recently, kind of theme about someone with special magical powers that the military's after, and people with good hearts had to help protect him, and he's just all naive and like, oh, I love you. It's trying to be like one of those happy lovey-dovey episodes, kind of like The Conversion was in season 1, but The Conversion, it worked. Like, that was really well written, and it's still one of my favorite episodes of The Outer Limits. This did not work. It was very poorly written, and it didn't flow. The whole military aspect felt fake and unbelievable and contrived and just thrown in there, and I wasn't really interested in this, and it kind of pissed me off that they never explained who he was. It seemed unnecessary to withhold that information, and just made me not interested in who he was, and it just felt really cheesy. And the way the reporter talked, like, oh, this is a story, blah blah blah, like, that was so fake too. Anyway, didn't like this one. So let's move over to the next episode, which is called Rite of Passage. It stars James Marsden, I believe, who was in Sonic the Hedgehog. He played Cyclops in the X-Men. He was in Westworld. He's been in a lot of movies. Anyway, he was a lot younger, of course, in this episode. And this is another episode I really liked. It was a very interesting concept about these humans that they were very sort of naive, and they lived in these villages controlled by aliens, and they referred to the alien who ran their village as Mother. And one of the humans got pregnant, and they had no idea what being pregnant meant. They had no idea what reproduction meant. And when she was pregnant, she was taken away to this faraway land that they call the Obsculus, that turned out to be just a lighthouse. And she was brought back 4 months later, and the guy was very sad that she was gone. And they tried to hook him up with another woman so he could have another baby with a different woman, but he wasn't interested in her. He just wanted his old girlfriend back. And when she came back, she didn't have the baby. They took the baby away, and she was just sad and depressed and wanted the baby back. And that's all she cared about, and so she wanted to go on the quest to get the baby back. And oh yeah, by the way, they're not allowed to leave the villages. It's forbidden. And so they go, they defy the orders, and they leave the village, and they're hunted by these snake thingies that look like the Goa'uld from Stargate SG-1. And another SG-1 connection. And the more I watch the show, the more it reminds me of SG-1. It's very obvious that the creators were still. And I looked it up that when this was made, Stargate SG-1 was already out the year before. It was in season 2 when this was made. Anyway, they go out and get hunted by the Goa'uld and try to kill them. And they finally get to the lighthouse, and they get the baby, and they try to run away, but it's like, stop, you can't do it, and blah, blah, blah. Oh, yeah, by the way, they found, ruins of cities and alien skeletons, so they think that the aliens came and killed off all their parents, all the humans, and enslaved them. And which is a theme of The Outer Limits, is kind of what the viewer thinks too. But at the end, it's revealed, no, that's not what happened. What happened, the aliens came back after humanity had already been extinct. They had wiped themselves out, but the aliens used their genetic science or whatever, their magic, to their Jurassic Park science, I guess you could call it, to bring the human race back to life. And so these are probably the early examples of them, and that's why they kind of had to mother them so closely and monitor them so closely, because they're still naive and don't know how to function or whatever. But they realized that trying to separate them from their child was a mistake, that their instinct was to care for it, so they let them keep the baby and just say that they'll be watching them just to help them out. so they don't get killed by the Goa'uld. They never explain what the deal with the Goa'uld was anyway. And they just evolve snakes that evolve to become dangerous. I don't know. But they're kind of a plot device. But I still love this episode. I thought it was a very interesting concept. I thought the characters were... It had like a Logan's Run type feel to it. And I thought the characters were really well developed. And I really cared about it. Like I talked about some of these bad episodes where like I don't care. But I really cared. What happened to this couple, and it was really suspenseful, and I think the reveal that... I like the reveal, in fact, that the aliens aren't the evil aliens that came, because that's kind of cliche, especially for this show. So I like that they went in a different direction with that, and that they were trying to care for them. So I thought this worked. It worked for me a lot. I thought this was a really great episode. So anyway, we'll get into the next episode, which is called Glyphic, which I had to look at this description very closely because I don't remember what happened in this episode. But now I think I remember it was very forgettable. I didn't think it was absolutely terrible, but it was okay, but it was kind of forgettable. So it was about it starts off with these, and I thought it was going to be another It ripoff, and I'm like, I don't need to see that, but it wasn't. It was because it starts off with these two kids, and they're wandering in the woods, and they hear someone calling Sarah or whatever her name was, and they call her, and she goes to it. But then, so I thought, oh, this is going to be another It's a monster, it's going to eat her. But it's not, and then we jump ahead like a decade or something, and when she's like 18 now, and her brother's in a coma, and apparently all the other children in the town were killed off by a disease from some plant or something. And so this hypnotist comes in, I think he was like this agent on SG-1. I can't remember what the name of the agency. It was one agency that popped up a lot, but he was a good agent. He was like hooked up with what's her face, Colonel Carter, Major Carter. I can't remember her rank. Anyway, Samantha Carter. He hooked up with her. Anyway, that actor played a therapist who was trying to help her, and they find out through the course, they find the alien device, and they assume that's what killed all the children, but it turns out it didn't kill all the children, that it actually protect her and her brother from being killed from the poison that was caused by the plant. But just saved them, and the machine and got in contact with her again to try to tell her how to save her brother, and they try to stop him because they think she's trying to kill her brother, but she's actually trying to save him. And she has all this knowledge of the aliens, she's speaking their language, but they think that she's just trying to kill her brother, so they did this procedure to get rid of that, and they found out too late that the procedure, the alien stuff, was actually very helpful, and it was supposed to be knowledge, and they got rid of it because they were scared, I guess. I don't know. I don't think this episode was bad. It wasn't interesting, engaging, but as I said, it was really forgettable, and I didn't think it was, anything special. Anyway, we'll move over to the next episode, which is called Identity Crisis. What the hell happens in this episode? Oh, this is the one with, God, what the hell is that guy's name, the 80s actor? Lou Diamond Phillips. That's right. He would come in Stargate Universe, so this is probably where the creators of the show met him. And so he plays a military guy who's in an experiment where his mind gets put into the body of an android so they can test it, but his best friend, who turns out to be evil, does sabotage his equipment that kills his actual body, so he's stuck in his android body, but the android body is degrading, so he only has like a day to live because it wasn't meant to be used long term. So while he's in the android body, he wants to investigate who killed him, but the evil colonel guy won't let him do it, so he breaks out and tries to visit his wife, and they go on an adventure to find out, who killed him. It turned out to be his best friend. Hoorah! I don't care. That's what I say to that. And so they tricked his best friend. His best friend goes into another android body. So they have a Marvel movie type ending where there was like the evil version of the good guy, like the two androids fighting each other, whatever. And but they get the better of him, and they put they managed to swap the Lou Diamond Phillips. He goes into the body of his best friend, and so his best friend stays in the android body and dies, but Lou Diamond Phillips gets to live on in his best friend's body, or best friend, the evil guy. Takes over his body, so everyone thinks that he died, but really he hasn't, and he gets to live happily ever after. Yeah, this episode was silly. To be frank, it was really silly, and I didn't really care for it. I didn't think it was the worst thing ever, and it was somewhat interesting, but it was kind of just, not that great. So then we get into the next episode, which is called The Vaccine, which I've actually read an article recently comparing it to modern times. Because this episode is about a virus that wiped out the entire human race. There's only a few survivors, and they desperately want a vaccine. Not exactly analogous to what's going on, because the coronavirus hasn't wiped out the human race, but it has done a lot of damage, and a lot of people are clamoring for the vaccine. Well, and this is a very interesting episode, though, because this is a much more dire situation. And there's these group of, I think, 9 people who are trapped in this hospital, and they get a visit from this guy. He says he has the vaccine, but turns out he only has 3 doses. And so there's like guidelines on who's supposed to get the doses. It's supposed to be, not children. It's supposed to be like, younger people in their 20s who are very fit and able to sort of propagate the species and survive and stuff like that. Problem is, the 2 or 3 people who happen to fit that description are assholes, and the doctor in charge doesn't like them very much. She prefers the kid and his old man, but the old man's gonna die, and he does, in fact. I think the asshole guys kill him, but he was terminal anyway, so he was about to die anyhow. But she hides it from him for a long time on who is going to get the vaccine. Oh yeah, there's this other soldier guy who's actually a really nice guy, and he's friends with the doctor, but he goes out to get more gas because they're almost out of electricity and they need more gas to power the generators, but he gets attacked by dogs and they assume he's dead. So she hides it from them for a while that there's only 3 doses. Like, she hides that fact, and as soon as they find out, the asshole guys say that they should have the doses, the 3 of them, because they fit the description best. But her plan was to give 1 dose to the little kid, 1 dose to one of the adults, one of the 3 assholes, and then the other dose to an old lady. And her reasoning why is that they had different blood types, and that if they were managed to manifest the vaccine for a while, then they could produce like a kind of immunity for everyone. I can't remember the exact science, but it was a long shot. So it was her plan that she could use it to save everyone, but of course the 3 asshole guys didn't like that plan. Because they didn't think it would work. They wanted a guarantee to survive, so they had guns, and they held her at gunpoint and forced her to give them the vaccine, but once they took it, it just killed them. And as it turns out, they all were immune from the disease anyway. I can't remember the exact reasoning, because they were one of the first people to quarantine or whatever. I don't know. But whatever the reasoning is, they all gained immunity, so when they tried to take the vaccine after they were already immune, it just ended up killing them. And so everyone else and they find that the soldier guy wasn't dead because they assumed he was dead because the dogs teared his suit, so they assumed he died from the disease, but he was immune as well. So he came out, and they all reunite, and they leave the asshole guys who killed themselves with the vaccine, and they go off and live happily ever after. It was a good episode. I did appreciate this episode a lot. I like the concept of the vaccine and how there's only 3 of them and they're fighting over who will survive. I do think that the asshole guys were a bit cliche assholes. It kind of made you that way so you didn't feel bad for them when they killed themselves. I think it kind of maybe would have been more interesting if they weren't blatant assholes, if they were actually redeemable in some cases, and that you could identify with their reasonings of wanting to use the vaccines and didn't actually hold her at gunpoint and force her to do it. But it was still a really good episode. I still appreciated it a lot. So, we'll get into the next episode, which is called Fear Itself. This was about a man who has under constant anxiety attacks, has severe psychological trauma because when he was a young boy, he set a fire in an orphanage that killed his sister, and it traumatized him for life. And he sees the image of one of the caretaker of the orphanage who says, "You killed your sister," and he constantly thinks that he's set on fire, and he's going around everywhere being like completely terrified, and he can't function. And so the doctors come up with this miracle experiment to cure him. And through curing him, they actually give him the ability to throw the fear back into another person. So there's these cliche gang bullies in the episode, and they keep bullying him and his girlfriend. And he manages to like get a hold of him and just throw the fear back in his face and make him afraid and scar him for life. And he starts to completely lose his fear and become a new person. Twist ending is when he goes back to the orphanage to find out the origins. He finds out that he didn't in fact set the fire that killed his sister. That what happened was that a priest who was in charge there had raped his sister, and when his sister fought back, he had killed her. And he set the fire to cover the evidence and just blamed the fire on this young boy, and everyone was convinced that the young boy actually set the fire. That's quite brutal. That is extremely brutal. And so when this guy figures it out, he uses his new superhero powers to inflict eternal fear on this priest guy, where the priest guy is in a constant state of feeling like he's being burned alive. So you see in the episode ends where he's in a mental institution in a rubber room going like, screaming, and because he believes that he's being burned alive. And you see in the mind's eye what he's experiencing, and he's experiencing a constant state of being set on fire. It's kind of a dark ending, but it's kind of a dark ending in a kind of satisfying way, because you see what a fucking creep this guy is. So you do kind of see it as him getting his comeuppance, and also that he raped and killed a little girl and set a fire that scarred this boy for life and made it so he couldn't even function, and that he was able to sort of put that fear and that trauma that he experiences back at that guy. It's kind of interesting because the asshole, priest guy was played by an actor who later will play like the savior in season 5, I guess. And he's an actor who appeared earlier as a mental institution patient back in season 2, I believe, in a very horrible episode. So it's an actor they reuse a lot. But yeah. I liked this episode. I didn't think it was great or anything. Like, it could have been better. Like, the bullies were very cliche. But I liked the character, the main character, and his gaining a relationship with his girlfriend. I thought that was a really nice relationship that worked. So, decent episode. So, next episode we get into is The Joining. So, this episode actually does feature Samantha Carter from Stargate SG-1, and as I said, SG-1 had been going at this stage, so they just borrowed her from that show. She's not the first, she's not the only, I should say, SG-1 actor to appear this episode. Just 2 more episodes from now, another one appears. But anyway, and this episode is about this guy who's on this remote outpost in Venus, which I don't think that's actually scientifically accurate, that humans would be able to establish an outpost on the surface of Venus. I don't think it's hospitable enough to allow something like that. But whatever. He's on this outpost, and they rescue him when they think that he actually should have died, that he should have ran out of air, and Samantha Carter is his girlfriend, and so she's really sticking out for him when all this weird shit starts to happen to him. He gets put in quarantine, but it turns out that he used like this alien organism, whenever he used it to survive. That's why he was able to go so long without air, but it turned him into this alien organism, made it more like an organism, like self-replicates. So he keeps trying to self-replicate, like parts of him keeps flying out, like another hand and stuff, and eventually like a whole other person that comes out, and the military just wants to execute him to hide the quarantine, but Samantha Carter convinces them to, rather than killing him, to send him back to Venus, because he can live in that atmosphere and study for them, but he's alone in solitude or whatever. Yeah, that's what I'll say about this episode. It was fine, I guess. I mean, there was a scene where like a version of him, like the new second version of him, formed and killed like the doctor, and was still going around trying to kill people. Why? Like, why? I don't understand the logic in that, because at the end of the episode you see like 12 different versions of him being stuck on Venus, and like, but why did they try to kill other people? Like, why are they evil version? I don't get it. It's like a gremlin. Anyway, so this episode was fine. Like, it was fine. So let's get into the next episode, which is called To Tell the Truth. And this is the episode that I had seen before. This one I am 100% certain I had bought it on iTunes. Because I was living in New Zealand in 2009, and this was before the age of streaming services there. At least there was no Netflix or anything like that. But there was iTunes, but you had to pay for every single episode. And so I really wanted to watch The Outer Limits, but of course I didn't want to pay $30, $40 for each season. So instead I just looked up the synopsis of certain episodes and tried to figure out what were the episodes I really wanted to fork out $3 for. And I found this one because I found the synopsis of this episode very interesting. So in this episode is about a colony on another planet, where a scientist discovers that the sun will explode and kill everyone in a couple days, but nobody there believes him. They think that he's full of shit, or that he's wrong, because apparently when they first went to the colony, he said that there was a volcano that was going to go off, so they all evacuated. Turns out no volcano went off, and they thought so. He's an idiot and they shouldn't trust him. But it does turn out that what he mistook for a volcano was actually more evidence of the fact that their sun was going to explode. But they still don't believe him, and then there's talk about these alien shapeshifters that used to live there that are now extinct. And then towards the end, you find out that because there's the ruler of the colony is like this asshole who's played by this actor who always plays an asshole. He played an asshole in Die Hard, like the asshole reporter. He played an asshole on, I think he was in like some 80s like college movie, like, what's it called? Something Minds. But anyway, he always plays an asshole in all these films. He was in that episode of Lost, Dr. Linus, where he played the asshole principal. But anyway, So he plays an asshole leader of the colony in this episode, and of course he doesn't believe him. He tries to, because it will cost him tons and tons of money to try to evacuate and return. So he's like, and they would completely waste all their fortunes and all their future and destroy all of them economically. So they're like, we're not going to do it. And the scientist is like, but if we don't, we will die. But he's like, no, you're full of shit. We don't think we will. And so it turns out that the head of security is working with the asshole leader of the colony, and head of security runs a test, thinks, oh, maybe this guy's an alien. So he does a test, and it turns out he is an alien. So all the people who live there, become like angry villagers with torches, and they want to kill him. So they arrest the guy, but the guy breaks out because he wants to save his girlfriend and her father, who is like the nice councilman, who is actually on their side, but no one will listen to him. So he wants to, if he can't evacuate everyone, he wants to at least evacuate them. So he breaks out. They break him out of prison, and they all go to evacuate. But the angry villagers with torches find out they're leaving and try to stop him. So he stays behind, sacrifices himself so that his girlfriend and her father can get away. And they get away fine, but he is killed, like beaten to death by the angry mob. And so then we see the, asshole leader of the colony guy back with the chief of security, where the chief of security reveals, actually, I'm the alien. Because as it turns out that the aliens lived on this planet before, but the humans came and wiped them out so they could take over the planet. But some of them survived, and they happened to be shapeshifters, and so one of them implanted himself in the colony as a spy and tried to convince the humans not to leave because he knew he wanted them all to die in the sun exploding, which it did. Of course, these aliens are adapted to the sun exploding stuff, so they can survive it. And so they're going to use the human equipment that's all going to be left behind, and they're going to take over the colony, and they're going to use it to make sure the humans can never return because there's like weapons and stuff there. And so the asshole, leader or whatever is, shown as chief security, turns into an alien, like, oh, I was an alien, then he dies, and they all die. And so everyone dies except for the dude's girlfriend and her father because they got away. Now, the analogy, again, is very lefty and very obvious in this. It's a very obvious climate change analogy here, where scientists are saying, look, we have evidence, we have proof, there's a disaster coming, we need to do something about it. But a large group of people is like, you're lying, there's no disaster, because it would hurt them economically to do something about it. And so they find ways to convince themselves that the science is wrong because it benefits them more economically if they do nothing. But of course, doing something does kill them. And then you have the alien genocide element, which harkens back again to that other episode, which also speaks the dangers of colonialism and stuff. So I love this episode. I think it's amazing, not just for the social commentary that I completely and utterly agree with, and I thought it was so spot on. In fact, when I first watched this episode back in like 2009, I was like hardcore into like the whole climate. I wouldn't say I was hardcore into helping like preventing climate change. I was hardcore into fighting against the propaganda that tried to insist that it's not real, that it's not actually happening. Because I think around that time period is when it was most common. Around the 2009, 2010, 2011 is when you had the strongest movement of people who believed it was all hoax and that there's no such thing as man-made climate change and there's nothing we can do about it. I mean, it's still around today, obviously, but I think it was at its power where it was most common for people to believe it back then. And so it was interesting, and that's probably why I picked this episode, because I think from the synopsis I could gather there was kind of an analogy like that, but I loved it. I thought it was so spot on to exactly why people would deny hard science that they're about to die, and of course that's relevant to nowadays with the whole I don't want to wear a mask thing. It doesn't even hurt them economically to do it. They just, well, they want to reopen the economy too early and let people die from the coronavirus anyway. So yeah, another example where it's relevant, where it continues to be relevant. And I think that asshole guy who's, in Die Hard and whatever else he was in, he's a good actor. And I think he actually does a really great job of playing an asshole, which is part of the reason why it works so well. Okay, so his name's William Atherton. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it. Oh, he's in Ghostbusters, of course. Of course, that's where he's come. So he's in Die Hard, Ghostbusters, Real Geniuses. That's the movie I was trying to think of. Yeah, he was in those movies. I think this is the most famous ones he was in. But anyway, he was great in this episode. And it was just such a powerful, well-written episode. I really was involved with the main character. And I do like how, even though it was a really dark, dour ending, it had glimmers of being a happy ending. For one, the good people, the father and the wife, the ones who actually did believe the guy was telling the truth, they got away. I mean, it's true the guy himself was killed by an angry mob, which is sad. But then the other happy part of the ending is the aliens who were genocide got their revenge, and they kind of deserved to kill off those humans. So that's kind of a happy ending, even though it's really a dark ending. But I love this episode. I thought it was absolutely great. So anyway, let's go ahead and get into the next episode of the season, which is called Mary 25. Now, this is the first of 3 sequels that this season does. I'm actually surprised this season did so many sequels. I didn't realize that Outer Limits had done so many sequels. I know they did a sequel to season 1 episode, The Quality of Mercy, with Robert Patrick being an alien and all that. They did a sequel to that in season 2, but I kind of thought that was like the only one, or at least one of the only ones, but there's 3 sequels. This one, this episode, Mary 25, is a sequel to the episode Valerie 23, and so when I first saw that, I'm like, really? You make a sequel? Because I didn't like it. I mean, that episode was actually decent, as I talked about it. It was better than I remembered being. But the concept of the episode is not that interesting. About an android woman who's designed to be a companion goes obsessed with the man that she's supposed to love and becomes a psycho killer. It's very stereotypical and nothing I was really into. Now, so I was like, why would you make a sequel to that? I will say that this episode was better than that, and they did turn that concept and they didn't just repeat the same thing. They did make a twist on that theme, which I enjoyed, but it still wasn't that great of an episode. Oh, the twist ending was stupid too. So anyway, so this is the other episode I mentioned that has another guest star from Stargate SG-1. This one has what's his name? Michael Shanks, I believe, who plays Daniel Jackson. Yeah, Daniel Jackson from SG-1. And so it has the same actor and the same character who was in Valerie 23 who financed the project, but he comes up, he turns the project around where instead of a male companion, it's a nanny android that they have, and so he wants to test it, but his bosses refuse, so he says, well, what if I test it on my own family? And alright, you can do that. So he wants to test his own family, brings him to his wife, and his wife's like, no, I'm not having this android. That's the other android almost killed the guy. I'm not going to have this android look after my kids. And then he, smacks her around, beats her up, and says, well, you will do it. So it turns out he's a wife beater. I don't know. That seemed kind of out of nowhere and kind of dumb. But anyway, the Michael Shanks, Daniel Jackson, actually works for this guy, so he comes over periodically and helps with the maintenance for this android, and he's kind of has a thing for the dude's wife. They had a past relationship or whatever, and he's constantly hitting on her. So you have this guy who's hitting on the married woman, and then you have the husband who beats his wife. Anyway, the android doesn't necessarily do anything like bad to the kids, but at one point, like when the kids attack each other, she overreacts and like keeps the kids separate from each other in separate rooms. And when the mother comes home and tries to get them out of the separate room, she like restrains the mother and attacks her. And so she freaks out and she's like, "I want the android out of here." And like, wife beater beats his wife for saying that. And so Michael Shanks finds out that the dude's beating his wife, and he's not happy at all about this because he's in love with her. So he programs the android to murder him, which they're not supposed to be able to murder human beings, but he's the computer programmer, so he's able to bypass that particular protocol and sends her to kill the husband. And so then you see the happy ending where he's with the wife and the kids love him and everything's great. The wife beater's dead and the android's gone and everything's fine. And then you find out that and this is the twist I was talking about. You find out that the wife was also an android. Dun, 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 that the real wife had actually died a while ago because the wife beater killed his own wife. And created an android to replace her that looked like her. That's really stupid. I'm sorry. And then the Michael Shanks is like, no! When he finds out that he had murdered like the dude, like she actually manipulated him into murdering her husband because she knew that he would. That was stupid. Sorry, that was dumb. I didn't really like this episode. It's not the worst thing ever, but whatever. Anyway, let's get into the next episode, which is called Final Exam. And this episode was way better than I thought it would be. It's not the best episode ever, but I did really enjoy it. I thought it was a great episode. So this episode, it was really intense. So this episode is about this guy who creates a cold fusion bomb. Of course, cold fusion is supposed to be a technology that doesn't exist in real life. It doesn't. But in this episode, he created it, and it's supposed to be sort of an analogy for a nuclear bomb. Apparently, it's a lot more powerful, and it can be in a smaller package. And he uses it to take this university hostage and threatens, and he wants these 5 people who had abused him or done him wrong in his life. Like, one of them was, like, really petty. It was, like, a teacher who used to discipline him too hard or something. But one was a father a stepfather that abused him, and another was a scientist who still stole his work and discredited him. So I can understand that. Even though the scientist denies it, I think he's full of shit. But it says you have to get all those people together and kill them. Otherwise, I'm going to set up this cold fusion bomb. And so then we enter Goodwin from Lost. If you've seen Lost, you know what I'm talking about. Goodwin, he's one of the others. Handsome guy. Anyway, he's like a scientist and a hostage negotiator. How about that? And so they call him in to negotiate with this guy, and he tries to, beg him not to do it, and they have these interactions. He tries to talk him down. It's really intense, hostage situation. I think it works. I think this is one you could do hostage situations in very cliche. I've seen it 1,000 times before. It doesn't come off that way here. It actually, and I think the sci-fi element of the cold fusion bomb actually gives a nice twist, because part of this dude's motivation for doing this is because he's convinced that the world's going to end because someone's going to blow it up with all these cold fusion bombs. He knows if he can create it, then other people will be able to create it, which of course is the twist ending. At the end of this episode, we find someone else creating it. Dun, 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 dun. But anyway, so he's convinced the whole world's going to end, so why not just get his revenge on the way out? But Goodwin, tries to talk him down, talk sense to him, and manages to outsmart him, and they disable the bomb. And, and the asshole general guy played by, the guy who played John Locke's father. Can't remember his name. Anyway, they managed to outsmart him. Hey, another lost cameo. Anyway, they outsmart him, and they kill him. and they free the hostages. Although one of the people he wanted to kill got shot first. That was a very intense scene where it's like, yeah, set off the bomb, or if you don't kill my first hostage, and they kill him. Wow. Oh no, he took this girl a hostage and said he was going to shoot her in the head if they didn't kill the first person on his list. That was an interesting twist too, how he had his demands were to kill 5 people. It's a very interesting thought experiment, moral dilemma or whatever. But I was actually kind of rooting for him to actually kill those 5 people. I don't know. But it was a very intense episode. I thought it worked very well. So next episode is called Lithia. Now, this is one of those episodes where the other one that I'm pretty sure I've seen this before. I think this might have been another one I rented on iTunes because the synopsis looked kind of interesting. It was a unfrozen caveman warrior, a soldier who was like cryonically frozen. He wakes up to find that there was an apocalypse and 90% of the world's population was wiped out, and this is post-apocalyptic dystopian. Well, not dystopian. They're trying to rebuild or whatever. But part of it is there was a disease that killed off all the men, so only women exist. And the society, so it's a society controlled by women, and there's only women, and so he is the last man on earth, and he's a soldier, and so he just tries to always trying to promote war and saying they should fight with the nearby villages because they're stealing their resources, and they're like, oh, but we had this council, we're in agreements, we don't believe in war because we're women, and it's, I don't know. Here's the thing about this episode. I kind of do agree that if women ran the world, there would be less violence, less war. But to a small degree, like, I don't know. I don't think it would be. I'm just in general, I'm against anything that stereotypes men and women too much and saying, oh, all men are like this and all women are like that. There's a variety. I mean, there is, obviously feminine and masculine traits, but it's an oversimplification to say that if there were only women, the whole world would be peace, and if a man came, he would destroy that peace and be like, oh, let's go to war. Now, it does help that it's not just a man, it's a soldier man, but still, I think they oversimplified, this episode oversimplified the sexes a bit. And also, there was also a bit where, all the couple of women wanted to sleep with him because they're like, oh, man. And the other women, of course, who were lovers with those women weren't too happy, and they were jealous because the man was stealing them away. So that was really cliche. Oh, yeah, and I have to mention that there's this, like, really cheesy, over-the-top, like, beyond cheesy sex scene with the 2 women in the shower that remind me of, like, the Red Shoe Diaries or other shit in Showtime. They used to come on the 90s that plays the sexy music, dun, dun, kind of like a softcore porn that they used to play on Showtime and other stuff in the 90s. I don't know how I would know about that. But it reminded me so much like that, and I'm like, God damn it, this is so fucking it is so cheesy. And I still think that, and it's probably because this show came out in the 90s, but this show didn't handle LGBT issues very well. Now, it didn't actively discriminate against them. They made it obvious that if there are only women alive, of course you're going to have some lesbians, obviously. And they didn't make that seem like a bad thing, but the way that they did the sex scene, like, oh, look at how sexy this is. It's just like, oh, stop. That's so cheesy. It's so cheesy. And overall, like, the ending where they reveal, like, the man gets them all in trouble and all these women die because they listen to him, and the men are evil, and so they just put him back in the Hydra, the whatever thingy. And it turns out that the council revived this man on purpose, and there's 8 other men just like him that they also revived on purpose, and they say the same thing happened in every village the other men came to too, that they all caused war and violence, which again I don't buy. I mean, I do, as I say, men definitely are inherently more violent and warlike than women, but not to this degree where it's I don't know. I just don't like anything that sort of oversimplifies and gender stereotypes. Personally, anyway. So, and plus that sex scene was so dumb. So yeah, so I didn't really like this episode. Sorry. Anyway, next episode is called Monster. Now, this is an episode, it's, to me, the movies, the stories, and the shows, or the TV episodes, or whatever, that start out really good, but then have this horrible ending that ruins it. To me, that's a lot more frustrating than watching something that's just terrible throughout, because you watch it, you know it's bad, and it continues to be bad, so it's not surprising. But it's more frustrating to me if you watch something that has great setup, that has great characters, and a great premise, but then they just kind of ruin it with a stupid ending. And that's what this episode is. So this episode features Ezri Dax and Nicole DeBoyer, again, making another appearance on The Outer Limits. She's a part of, there's this group of people who are recruited by the army to use like psychic or telekinetic powers. They apparently have the ability to lift things with their mind. And so the first thing that I think it's Benson, if you remember that show, who plays, that actor who plays the military general who's in charge of, I don't even know if he's a general, but he definitely works for the military. But anyway, he's in charge of this group of telekinetics. And the first thing he does when they test their abilities and destroy a stone, they're like, haha, we can move forward with the plan. And they're like, what's the plan? Well, we're going to execute someone, obviously. And so Ezri is very much against killing someone, where the other people in the group are fine with it. Like, they had the same actor who played the young version of General Hammond in SG-1. He's there, and he was served in the military, so he's perfectly okay with assassin, because the person the one to assassinate is like this evil dictator guy in Eastern Europe who's responsible for genocide. So everyone's like, he deserves to die. He'll kill thousands of people if we don't kill him. So they manage to blackmail and intimidate Ezri into going along with this, and so they kill him. So next, they're like, since that worked, they want to go ahead and kill another dictator. So this one is an African warlord type who's, again, murdering, causing genocide and killing a bunch of people. So they want to kill him, and so they do kill him, but every time they do, Ezri gets a stroke, and it's getting worse. But then, so this was an interesting premise, and I thought the episode was great up until this point, and I thought they could have took this episode in a very interesting direction to that question. It was a very, again, moral dilemma, a good question, like, is it worth murdering someone? It's like, would you go back in time and kill baby Hitler? Like, these are obvious dictators who deserve to die, but is it okay to use your telekinetic powers to squash their heart and cause them to have a heart attack from 1 billion miles away? Is that really ethical? So it was an interesting dilemma, but then this episode takes a complete ridiculous and stupid turn at this point, where this monster comes and starts killing off all the different telekinetic people, and they think Benson is saying that the monster was this happened before, and the monster is a construct of their minds, that their subconscious are letting them get a hold of them. And so there's this hot guy who apparently used to be a killer for the CIA or whatever that Ezri was in love with, but when she finds out that he was a killer for the CIA, she doesn't trust him anymore. And so they're sort of, them and Benson are the last three standing, and Benson tries to convince the hot guy that Ezri was responsible for creating this monster because she had her doubts. And Ezri also believes that she's responsible. She tells hot guy to kill her so they can stop the monster, and he's like, I don't want to kill you, but she begs him, please kill me. So she kills her. But dun dun dun, monster's still there because it wasn't Ezri, it was actually Hawkeye who was creating the monster. And so the Hawkeye actually has to go and fight the monster which kills both of them in order to stop the monster. That was so stupid. I'm sorry. That was a good premise with the telekinesis powers, killing evil dictators. But now there's an evil monster as a construct of their minds, and they have to kill Ezri. No, it's actually not Ezri. And plus, like, Ezri had this dream where she predicted the future, and they never explained how she had that dream or what the deal with this is. And it's just a waste. It's a waste of potential, in my opinion. So I did not care for this episode. So move on to the next one, which another Star Trek actor. Actually, there's several Star Trek actors as well. There was Ezra in the previous episode. This episode has the Doctor from Voyager, Robert Picardo, and it's called Sarcophagus. Now, the whole entire time I was watching this episode, I thought of I couldn't get this really cheesy joke out of my head. The really cheesy joke is, what did the doctor say to the Egyptian patient who was sick? The doctor said, "You have a bad sarcophagus." Get a sarcophagus now. Anyway, I could not stop thinking about that stupid joke while I was watching this episode. But it was boring. In fact, I think I fell asleep during this episode, and I had to go back and watch it again. I almost fell asleep again because it's boring. It's about this group of archaeologists who find this sarcophagus, sorry, find a sarcophagus like hidden in Alaska, and like some cave. And it turns out to be an alien inside. And the alien used to live like hundreds of years ago, thousands of years ago. And he's a good alien, though. But anyway, the archaeologists are all fighting amongst themselves because Robert Picardo wants to just call this other team of scientists and rake in the money. But the main scientist who's in charge she wants to keep studying it so she become famous, but then her boyfriend is no, sorry. This is boring. It was a boring episode. I didn't really care about it. It was stupid. I can't remember what happened at the end. The fucking lady and the boyfriend that saved the alien from Robert Picardo who tried to kill him. And so the alien put them in sarcophaguses, and they woke up like thousands of years later where humans and these aliens live together in peace. This episode sucked. Anyway, sorry. Let's get into the next episode. You had a bad sarcophagus. Let's get into the next episode, which is called Nightmare. Da, da, da. Now, this, ironically, is another episode that was ruined by a stupid ending. Although it wasn't all that great to begin with, it was somewhat interesting to begin with. So it's about this military badass on a spaceship. They go to this alien planet to set off some device that they have no idea what it does, except some civilian scientists who, this one is different, very different from the other civilian observer. She's actually like all war hungry. And anyway, she knows what the bomb is. Ooh, I gave it away. But she knows what the device is, but no one else knows. And they go to set it off on a planet that's supposed to be uninhabited, but they get attacked, and then they're held captive by these aliens that torture them and try to get information out of them. And then the whole team starts to turn on each other and starts to think that they're in league with the aliens, they're traitors, and they all start seeing shit, and the aliens like interrogate them and try to get them to turn on one another and try to get them to reveal what the device is, and they eventually get it out of them that's a bomb that's supposed to win the war for the humans and defeat the aliens and wipe them out for good. And so they eventually tell the lady scientist to deactivate the bomb and deactivate the security that's protecting the bomb. But she doesn't. Instead, she sets the bomb off, but it turns out that they were never captured by aliens in the first place. It was just the military brought them back to Earth and ran psychological experiments to see how much they could trust the military people and how much they would buckle under pressure. But the bomb was real, and she did set it off, and she said, "No, please tell me we're not on Earth." And they're like, "Oh my God, you set off the bomb," and the bomb goes off and kills all the human race. I'm sorry, but that's fucking stupid. I don't buy the premise of this ending. I think it's so dumb. Like, first of all, like the whole concept that they torture their soldiers and put them through this kind of hell just to test them out. That's kind of dumb. Worse off, though, even if they're gonna do this, why would they have a real bomb there? Especially if they knew it was a bomb capable of destroying Earth. Why would they put it there? And they should know that the scientist who created it, she would be capable of setting it off and deceiving these quote-unquote aliens. Obviously, they should have considered that kind of scenario instead of, why do they have a real bomb? Why not just use a fake? It's so stupid. It's like, to me, this is one of those contrived endings where it's like, oh, humans kill themselves for their own greed and stupidity. But it's not earned the way that other episodes are earned, because there's no way they would fucking do this. So this episode angered me. It sucked. Anyway, let's get into the next episode, which is called Promised Land. Now, this is another sequel. This is a sequel to the episode in season 3, I believe, The Camp, where and in fact, they did a whole previously on the Outer Limits, and now the continuation. Oh no, it wasn't this episode, it was the next sequel they did that for. Never mind, I'm wrong. But I think they did show clips. I do remember seeing clips from The Camp. But anyway, it was, in that episode, there was all the humanity lived in these camps run by androids, because apparently aliens had taken over the planet. They found out they were abandoned, so they were able to overpower the androids and escape. And the episode ended with them going into the great wide open under the skies all blue, and it was a happy ending. Here we get to see what happens to them afterwards. It's not so happy ending. We get yet another Star Trek actor. We get Odo this time, Renee Auberjonois, who plays an alien, and apparently there's aliens living on the farm, and there are most of the other aliens left, and they try to play it off as if they didn't. Like, they think the humans are extinct, although Odo knows otherwise, but he tries to hide it from his daughter and his grandchildren. And so the boys are like, oh, they go down to the city and they see the humans, and most of the humans die because they eat poison fruit. So only 4 of them survive, and they try to get, because all the food has been poisoned by the aliens. So they go to the farm to try, because the aliens are growing their own food that isn't poisoned, so they try to steal some of that, and they keep fighting each other, and some of them die, and there's a big war that happens. Odo gets killed, and I think one of Odo's grandchildren, like the older bully boy, he gets killed, and several of the humans die, whereas only like 2 left. But of course, the mute girl who's in the previous episode, she survives. Of course, she's a smart one, and they end up making a truce with the mother and the young boy alien, and even though they don't speak the same language, they realize that they don't need to fight and kill each other, that they can cooperate, and it ends on a happy note. But they had just killed the boy's brother, and they killed the woman's father, and the boy's grandfather. I find it hard to believe they would be so willing to cooperate with the humans. Now, the humans did have them ready to kill them, and they killed several of them, by the way. Their friends had been killed by these aliens as well. But they were able to convince the humans not to kill them and to cooperate. I think the very next scene in this episode is the aliens trick the humans and kill them all. But that's, of course, not with the music and the happy voice at the end. Oh, the cooperation is the best way. Try to imply that they all get together perfectly fine. So, whatever. It was a decent episode. I don't know if we needed a sequel to The Camp, but we had to have one. This is fine. We get to see what happens. So, it was okay. So we get to the next episode, which is called The Balance of Nature. And, this episode's fine, I guess. It's about a scientist who has this experiment. Isn't that, like, I could describe, like, almost half the episodes that Outer Limits to begin with that description. But anyway, scientist who has this experiment who can make people young, and he has a wife who's dying of skin cancer, and so he uses it on her to try to make her revert back to a time before she had skin cancer, save her life, and it works for like a few seconds, but then the skin cancer comes back full force and she dies immediately. So he blames himself, and he moves to the suburban area. He meets this old woman who's a neighbor who's very nosy and always talking to him about blah 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 blah. And it turns out the old woman has a husband who beats her. And he starts to fall in love with the old woman, but she's like, I'm too old for you. I'm like 40 years older than you. But the guy finally gets his machine to work. But he gets it to work by having two subjects, and you make one older and the other younger. So you just swap the thing, and that's how he compensates for it. And so eventually, like, the husband beats the woman half to death, so she's near death. So he takes her to the machine and he gives her his youth. So he becomes an old man, but she becomes younger. And for some reason, her memories revert back to the age she was in. So she doesn't remember anything beyond when she was like 30 or in her 30s or 20s or however young she was. So she thinks it's the 50s. I was a bit thrown off by that. I thought that was weird. But anyway, old man, the abusive husband comes in and he oversees what they're doing. And he comes in with a gun and tries to force the scientist to, by gunpoint, to give him his youth back as well, by sacrificing himself to give him this youth, which would surely kill him. But he manages to trick him so that he takes the old man's youth, so the abusive husband, so the abusive husband died, and the scientist guy regains his youth, so he's back to the age he was. And that's where the episode ends. It's fine, as I said. It's fine. I mean, it was somewhat interesting concept, and the characters were somewhat interesting. There's some things I didn't buy, I thought would break a drive, so... But overall, it's fine. It's fine. Anyway, we'll get into the next episode, which is called The Origin of Species, which is yet another sequel. Now, this is a sequel to, I can't remember the name of the episode, but it's an episode I didn't really like very much. And so when I saw they were having, and this is when they did the previously on The Outer Limits, which is very out of place. I thought I was watching, like, The Next Generation or something. But anyway, and it's like, and now the continuation. Like, this is what Star Trek used to do. But anyway, I can't even remember the name of the episode, but it was the one where Ryan Reynolds was in, and he was in this episode too, but he barely appeared in it. And it was the one where that guy got all crazy and did a genetic experiments on himself, and he was able to unlock this alien ship that had this message like, "Oh, we're the ones who seeded humanity," or whatever, and they all jumped aboard an alien ship to go off, which I said at the time I didn't buy that they would do that. That felt very unrealistic and fake. But here we get the continuation, and I really don't like what they did with this. First of all, we didn't need the sequel. I think as much as I didn't like that episode, the ending was better if it's just left as a mystery, as you just assume they go on an alien planet and they all live happily ever after. To actually see what happens and see them going through this horror or whatever kind of undermines the episode, in my opinion, even though it wasn't all that good to begin with. And it's just cheesy. Like, first of all, Ryan Reynolds and the old scientist dude who were the two main characters of the previous episode, who were the best actors, best characters they killed them off immediately. Because, hey, why not? But they appear as, like, projections being like, "Do what I say." Which is stupid. Like, you don't kill Ryan Reynolds in the first 2 minutes of your episode. What the hell is wrong with you? Anyway, He should like regenerate his baby hand and become Deadpool. Anyway, so it mainly follows Ryan Reynolds' girlfriend from the previous episode, Hope, and how she like hears his voices because she was zapped by the alien. But all the other people who are surviving, oh, I hate being here. The alien ship wants to kill us, and they all go missing one by one. But then they all find each other, and they're all freaked out. But then they finally land on the planet, like over there. So they go there. And they're like, oh, what if there are aliens here? What's happening? Where's it? How come none of the aliens are meeting us here? What's going on? And then they walk out and they find out, oh no, I was wrong. It was Earth all along. Yes, you finally made a monkey. Yes, you finally made a monkey. Yes, you finally made a monkey out of me. I love you, Dr. Zayas. If you don't know that reference, you need to watch The Simpsons. Anyway, the Planet of the Apes ending, when they found out they're actually, the spaceship just went in a giant circle and brought them back to Earth, but it's like hundreds of years in the future because, light speed travel and all that. I hated that. That's so dumb. That really undermines the previous episode. It completely rewrites it, saying that it was actually humans who sent that ship, not aliens, and the human race was like wiped out like before because of genetic engineering, and they knew it would happen again, so they wanted to send them into the future and come back after it happened. Of course, the whole human race is wiped out. Like, they find remnants. Instead of the Statue of Liberty, it's the Golden Gate Bridge. This time it has to be some kind of American landmark, of course, that's in ruin. You blew it up! You best, goddamn you all to hell! Anyway, so all of humanity is wiped out, and there's only, so the hope is like, oh, we need to restart the human race, but the other guy is like, there's not a genetic pull. Thank you! So many other sci-fi episodes, and in fact, I think there were some in the Outer Limits itself, assume that you can start the entire human race again with 4 people or 5 people, even 9 people, as this case would be, or maybe it's 7, however many. Not enough! But it turns out that while they're in hibernation on the alien ship like sampled the DNA and was able to create all these babies with different diversities. There's enough diversity for them to start the human race again. That's stupid. It's stupid. This episode's stupid. You don't need a sequel. And especially you don't need a sequel to the episode that just makes it a lot worse and ruins it. Don't kill Ryan Reynolds off in the first 2 minutes of the episode. What the hell is wrong with you? Anyway, let's go ahead and get into the next episode, which is called Phobos Rising. And I love this episode. This is another great episode, another really powerful episode of the season. This has Adam Baldwin, who I recognize most from Firefly. Of course, he's a Baldwin, the Baldwins. And it's a very interesting concept. So, there's apparently Earth is like boiled down to 2 main factions. I can't remember what they're called, but they're basically the East and West. You got like Europe and the United States and all the English-speaking countries. And probably South American countries as well, though they didn't specify. And then you got the East, which is like the Middle East and China and Russia and all that. Actually, I didn't say Russia. It's mainly seen Middle Eastern and Chinese and Japanese and all that. But basically, those two were kind of had a sort of a Cold War-ish. And so there's 2 outposts on Mars. And they see what they think is like the Earth being destroyed. And so we follow, of course, the Western colony, who has a truce with the Eastern colony that's on Mars. But they believe, the Western colony starts to believe that the Eastern Coalition, whatever it's called, killed everyone on Earth and destroyed the Earth. And they believe that they did it by smuggling this material from Mars that can be used as weapons of mass destruction. And so they think they find evidence of these weapons being smuggled. So there's Adam Baldwin's kind of the second in command, and he has a thing, kind of relationship with the liaison from the Eastern Coalition, who is, because apparently they have a liaison, so there's someone from the Eastern Coalition living in the Western Station, and there's also a Western liaison living on the Eastern Station, but we never really see him except one scene. But we see the Eastern liaison, who's a really hot chick, and Baldwin has a thing for her, and but the commander of the station thinks that she's a traitor and a saboteur, and purposely sabotaged them, is going to try to kill them all, and so they have her arrested, and Baldwin tries to stick up for her, but and then we get it's really intense. I love like mutiny type stories. Like I'm a sucker for those, and so we get like a mutiny type story where Adam Baldwin tries to relieve the commander of duty, but the commander in duty wants to relieve Adam Baldwin because she wants to fire missiles at the Eastern Coalition station, but he's like, we don't have enough evidence to prove that they're trying to kill us, and they sent like a drone out towards them, and she's convinced the drone is carrying weapons that are going to kill them all, but of course it turns out that's not the case, that the drone was just carrying communications, because they suffered, like, during this attack, like, there was some kind of disaster that resulted, that they believe was the result of Earth being destroyed. They're like, oh, how do we know Earth was destroyed? Well, if it is destroyed, this disaster is going to happen, and the disaster happened. So to them, that was confirmation that the Earth was destroyed and humanity is gone. And she believes that the Eastern Coalition did it, and that they're now going to try to wipe her out, so she launches missiles at them, and so they launch missiles back, and they try to convince that once they establish communications, once the missiles have been launched, they prove that it wasn't them. That they didn't actually, try to sabotage them and have proof, but it's too late. They can't turn off the missiles, so both stations are obliterated, and everyone's killed except for Adam Baldwin and the hot chick from the Eastern Coalition. They managed to survive because they jumped out of the station. They were out on Mars or whatever. And they come back in, they get a communication from Earth that reveals, the Earth actually wasn't destroyed, it was the moon that was destroyed, and it was destroyed not in an attack, but an accident, kind of a Chernobyl-esque accident from the Eastern Coalition, playing with power, and it destroyed the moon. So that disaster, they thought that confirmed the destruction of Earth actually was coming from the destruction of the moon. Uh-oh. And so it was all for nothing. In fact, they had that ironic irony of the train. Oh, Earth is such a disaster now. You guys consider yourself lucky that you didn't have to suffer any from that. But they actually suffered much worse because they ended up killing each other because they let their suspicions and fears get the better of them, which I do think is a powerful message. Again, and I do like how the Adam Baldwin character was kind of more level-headed, and they should have listened to him all along. So I really enjoyed this one. I thought this was another great episode. So then we get into the next episode, which is called Black Box. This has Ron Perlman. You should know who he's become a pretty well-known actor. And this is another one of those episodes that's a mess. That you can tell that didn't really have enough drafts, and that they went to, because there was an interesting concept about a soldier who was, dying in the war field, but then all of a sudden he's living this reality where he's working for a company as a salesman, and all the people who are on his team in the military are there, and they're working with him, and he wants to revisit his wife who's suddenly murdered for no good reason, and there's this woman who keeps coming to see him, but turns out that she's that he isn't actually in this reality, that he is in fact dying out in the field, but the woman wants to get some information from him, wants to find out who on his team betrayed them, and thinks that he knows, but every time she tries to ask him about his experience in the military, he deflects, and he only wants to think about his daughter and how he wants to reconcile with her. And so they reveal eventually that, yeah, this is the case, that he's actually dying and he's not really in this reality. And so they bring his daughter, real daughter, in and get him to meet with her, where she does say, I love you, and whatever. And he tells them what they need to know, and the episode ends. It was mostly, like, it was very disjointed, as, again, I think it's a great idea. It kind of reminds me of Frame of Mind, and I love those sort of mind-bendy, twisty ideas. Now, Frame of Mind is an example where they did it perfectly, where it, like, gelled, and they managed to really distort reality, where this is an example of doing it wrong, where you don't get that sort of distortion of reality. The story just seems out of place in a jumbled mess. And it was very clumsy, I think is the word I'm looking for, particularly with the introduction of the woman who's trying to get information from them. And you didn't get the feeling that it was something eerie and something's wrong and that his mind was bending. And plus the resolution was very, like, that's it? Like, the daughter just shows up and says, I love you, and then he gives them the information and dies. Like, I don't know. I felt very empty after watching this episode. I think it was a good idea. They just needed more drafts. They needed more time what they had to get it right, which obviously they didn't have because they did not get it right. Anyway, we now come to the season finale of season 4 in our image, and it's another fucking clip show. I don't understand why the Outer Limits thinks it's such a great idea to end each season on a clip show. You know, back in my day, like even like back in the 90s and in current times, in the 2000s and 2010s and the 2020s, season finales are supposed to be great. They're supposed to be like a grand finale with those to be like the best episode of the season. How come the Outer Limits is ending all their seasons on a fucking clip show? I think season 2 was the exception. Season 2 ended in an episode a lot of people liked. I just thought it was okay. But this episode was terrible. Now, it featured another Star Trek actor, Nana Visitor. And as soon as I saw her name in the credits, I was like, yeah, Nana Visitor. I love Major Cure. But anyway, it's another clip show. And it was about the androids, and the main android was played by this actor who was like, God, where do I know him from? He looks so damn familiar. So I looked him up, and he played Krychek on The X-Files. So I was like, oh, okay. So anyway, he plays a android that kills people and goes crazy and breaks out, and he takes Nana Visitor hostage, and she pretends just to be a secretary that doesn't know anything about fixing androids, but she eventually manipulates him and says, haha, she was actually the scientist who was called in to fix the problem. But then we get the double twist that he actually knew that, haha, and he manages to trick her and kill her and get the information he wanted from her to set all the other androids free. Now, throughout this entire episode, we get clips from other episodes of The Outer Limits that have absolutely nothing to do with this episode, and the loose connections they have to try to tie it into this episode are so fucking weak and have absolutely nothing to do with anything, but the characters are acting like, oh, you gotta show me these memories, they're so important. They are out of context. They do not fit in this episode. They're not important. They have nothing to do with what's going on. It's terrible. Why the hell they do clip shows? Now, in a previous video, I said that The Outer Limits, along with Stargate SG-1, was a rarity because they actually managed to do clip shows good. I take that statement back. It's true of SG-1, and it's true of the first clip show they did in season 1 of The Outer Limits, Voice of Reason, which actually did manage to nicely blend those clips into a present context story. But this episode and the season 3 finale, I can't even remember what it's called, both of those completely failed. Like whenever they showed clips, especially this one, whenever they showed clips of previous episodes of androids, like they showed the one with Lou Diamond Phillips going into an android's body, and they showed that stupid premiere of season 3, The Bits of Love, where the guy was and that was supposed to be taking place in the post-apocalyptic future, and this is set in present times or near future, and there was another one that was actually set in a distant future, the way beyond this, that they try to change it, say, oh, this is relevant to this episode. It's not. It's not. It's terrible. It sucks. Why they? I hope this is the last time that they do a clip show for the finale, but I fear that it's not. But anyway, I'll find out. So those are all the episodes of Season 4 of The Outer Limits. I did go a bit longer this time, but there was a lot more episodes. So, as I always do, let me give my worst and best episode of the season, starting with the worst episode. Now, unfortunately, with worst, you do have a lot of options. You got Criminal Nature, In the Zone, Nightmare, which was a bit of a nightmare to watch. Did I talk about Nightmare? What happened? Oh yeah, Nightmare was the one with the experiment where it was Earth all along. It wasn't really the aliens. It was the human military running mine experiments. That's stupid. And then you also have the Origin of the Species, which was the stupid sequel to the Ryan Reynolds episode that it was Earth all along. It was so dumb. And then Black Box, the one I just talked about, which was a commendable idea, but it was complete and utter mess, and they totally failed to do that. But ultimately, for me, it comes down to 2 episodes for worst. I'm going to say the runner-up for worst is Josh. As I said, it was an interesting concept, but they completely botched it. It was an absolute mess, to the point where it was goofy and comically bad. But as for worst episode of the season, I'm definitely going to have to go with the one I was just talking about, In Our Own Image. This made no sense. This is an utter mess, but I don't think it was a matter of them not having enough time. I think this concept was doomed to begin with, unless it ditched the whole clip show idea, because those clips did not, and like every time they showed a clip, I was like, I could just hear the producers saying, we're running out of money, we need to show a clip so we can stop spending more money on making shit. It didn't fit at all. It didn't add anything to the story. It was like all of a sudden they just stopped what they're doing to watch a scene from another episode. And they even showed scenes from Valerie 23 that had nothing to do. I think they tried to say, oh, Valley 23 was an earlier version of my program. Bullshit. It's terrible. So, as for best episode, as I say, we have a lot of contenders for that as well, because this was a good season, a very good season. In Another Life, the one with the parallel universes, that was great. The vaccine, as I said, them fighting over the vaccine, that was very interesting. Final Exam, the terrorist situation with the guy with the cold fusion bomb, that was great as well. But we had, as I said, I had a lot of 9s in this episode, in this season as well. A lot of, because there wasn't that many episodes in previous seasons I given 9s, but I gave 9s to a lot, such as Hearts and Minds, the Men Against Fire episode with the military where they're hunting beasts that turned out to be people, Relativity Theory, another one of my favorite ones with the they go to the planet to kill the aliens so they can strike it rich, but it turns out they were Boy Scouts, so the aliens wipe out the human race in return. That was great. Rite of Passage, the one with James Marsden, where they have humans are being raised by aliens. They go off on an adventure where the hunted by gold. That was great as well. And also Phobos Rising, as I just talked about with Ed and Baldwin, the one with the 2 Martian... 2 human settlements on Mars who went to war with each other because they let their fears get the better of them. Another great episode. But as for the best episode of Season 4, I'm going to have to go with To Tell the Truth. Maybe it's because I had seen this one before, but I actually think this was an amazing episode. I think it is one of the best episodes of The Outer Limits. Not only for its poignant social commentary, it's so incredibly relevant, especially to the climate change crisis, but even a bit relevant to our current crisis about how people will refuse to look at the cold hard facts and science in front of them and refuse to listen to experts because what they say will cost them economically, and so they'd rather just turned a blind eye to that. And oh yes, wiping out indigenous people, also not a good idea. So, and of course it had a lot of great character moments with the scientist guy and his relationship with the girlfriend. Like, I bought that. That was great. And it had a good actor from the asshole guy from Ghostbusters and Die Hard. Like, he's such a good asshole. So amazing episode. I really enjoyed this one. So, to tell the truth, it's the best episode of season 4. So that's it for my review of season 4. But first of all, let me give my rating for season 4 as a whole. For my rating out of 10 for season 4 of The Outer Limits 90s version is a 9. Excellent, which is by far the highest rating I have given. I think this was a amazing season. Because it had a lot of great episodes. Now, as I mentioned, there were a lot of bad ones too, but I think the good far outweighed the bad. Like, there was no 1s in this season, it's just 3s and 2s, but I had 9s and 10s, a lot more in the season than I had in the previous season. So I think I can tell that Naren Shankar was involved. I think the writing really improved, and it kind of got away, because when I went to first watch my rewatch of The Outer Limits, I was worried that would sort of become repetitive and get up on its own head with having to have this dark twist ending and just repeating the same themes over and over again, which to a degree is the case, but they managed to keep it interesting. Like, even stuff like Relativity Theory and To Tell the Truth, they had the dark twist ending, but it works. Like, it works. They managed to put a spin on it. They managed to have some great social commentary and telling interesting, fresh stories with interesting characters you can relate to in just one episode. So they managed to keep it fresh and do new and different things with it, which most of these episodes were new and different to me, because I hadn't seen most of these before. And even the ones I had seen, I think I had seen them like a decade after they came out, so like fairly recently. But anyway, that is it for my review of Season 4 of The Outer Limits. Thank you for watching this much longer video of The Outer Limits, and I shall be back to talk about future seasons of The Outer Limits, starting with Season 5 next month. So be sure to check out my channel for that. Also, check out my channel for many more videos that I do on other shows like Star Trek, The Expanse, Breaking Bad, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. Thanks a lot for watching.